through my unique lens. But also, what we're going to try to do here is reframe how we see the underpinnings of what give us the opportunity to do something as magical as this, right? Okay. So, the first thing I want to do is give you a fair warning, okay? I actually listened to this on the way here. My guru right now is a guy named Nate Hagens. Nate Hagens is an interesting character, but he does a podcast called The Great Simplification. In fact, I even have a little 7-minute video that we can watch about it. But he found a study recently where he was looking at mental health stratified across different political orientations. And it just so happens that, you might have guessed this too, that people who kind of lean liberal tend to register and have more mental health issues, or at least they get the diagnoses. And I think that this is probably a correlation causation issue. And it might be, and I kind of agree with the conclusion he came up with. First of all, I think I took a screenshot, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the finer points are actually pretty interesting. Women are much higher on the registered scale of who reports, and I think that's a really important word, who reports these mental health issues. But no matter who you are, whatever gender, on the liberal side, we tend to report more mental health issues. This could be a number of factors, but my suspicion about this is that we tend to care about larger issues. Okay, we tend to have our mind wrapped around these larger issues that are presenting themselves right now. And what this workshop is, and the reason I'm giving you a fair warning, is that we exist now in what many different thinkers consider to be a convergence of crises. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some unique, interesting facts about these crises that I feel like are underrepresented. Okay, but if you are in a present situation where you feel like your own mental health is sort of you're not in a parasympathetic state, you feel like, okay, maybe this isn't for me right now, please feel free to get up and leave. That's fine. Okay, but we're gonna go there. We're gonna get raw. Okay, because if you are feeling strong and you're ready, you know what I mean, and you want to embrace the nowness and the opportunities that exist when it comes to trying to reorient not only your own life and your scope, your widening scope of empathy, but if you want to also kind of talk about how this culture has failed to really meet these challenges face to face, and maybe how we could not fail in the future, then I invite you to stick around, okay? So, yeah, awesome. I thought at least half people would leave. You still might. It's gonna be raw. I'm gonna try to add levity to this, because I mean, that's the point, right? Okay, so, a reorientation. We live in a multi-crisis, a meta-crisis. Different people have different words for it. There's a bunch of different thinkers. I'm sure it seems like many of you seem to be potential podcast listeners. There's all these interesting buzz phrases that everybody uses. But yes, we are in a convergence of different crises. And what I want to do is I want to kind of break them down, okay? But before we do that, let's talk about music festival culture, okay? Music festival culture can change the world, man. Right? How many times have we heard that? And how many times have we felt that, especially when we were younger and more idealistic? It seems like folks that are here are also a little bit older, which is great, because everyone deserves to have as much oblivion fun as their life experience will let them, because I got to have that, and I hope that my children get to have that too, right? But music festival culture can change the world, man, right? I believe so, but I think we need to reframe how we're thinking about this. So in 2016, Papadosio plays Bonnaroo. We played that stage. I thought I was the coolest person ever, man. And then an experience happened where they invited me to be on a panel. It was an environmental panel, right? So funny, because who the fuck am I? Who am I? I'm just a guitar player. I don't know anything, literally anything about the environment other than that, like, people cut down trees, man, that sucks, right? I didn't know what our present predicament was. I had no idea. So they put me on this panel, and what was so funny about the panel is that it was powered by a diesel fuel generator, right? And we had to use highly amplified microphones because the stage that they put was next to the diesel generator, right? So first of all, there's only 5 people on the panel. So what I quickly realized, and this is I realized this was my seminal moment of being like sort of broken out of the understanding that music festival culture was headed in any direction that was meaningfully different than dominant culture, right? Because the whole buzz line is, if we could just take the energy that's happening here in this place and take it out to the world, man, we could change the world, right? That's the prevailing idea. But let's break it down, okay? Like, I think maybe the principal issue is not that the vibe isn't here, because the vibe is here for sure. I feel it, you feel it, we all know it. But it's been dishonest. It's been purposefully leaving out some very, very important baseline, simple terms that define our ability to even do this, okay? So let's take a look at those. In fact, before I do that though, let's go back to this one. I think that this is a worthwhile little factoid. Fossil fuel. The way that I see a music festival is this is a fossil fuel party, okay? And I'll validate that in a little bit, but a diesel generator, for example, utilizes 70% on average crude oil from across the ocean. The United States is a net importer of fossil fuel, crude oil, okay? I didn't even know what crude oil was. I thought crude oil, okay, that's diesel and gas, right? So much more than that. It's plastics, it's asphalt, it's pretty much everything that allows our modern life to exist, okay? Even our tires, even our cars, even our plastics, our medical supplies, like it's pretty much everything. And so when we say a blanket statement, fossil fuels are bad, are they? If they save lives, are they good? I think that the question and the answer depends upon who you are, at what time in your life, and what you're enjoying. Right now, if you zoom out from this festival, what is this? This is a fossil fuel party, okay? I'll validate all of this in a minute because I actually did my research to figure out where the energy for Secret Dreams comes from. This isn't anything to say badly about Secret Dreams, because it's something to say we have to continuously zoom out. And that's hence the name of this little sojourn that we're on. We're zooming out, okay? So, here in Central Ohio, does anyone know what the most invasive species is? Okay, yeah. There's lots of honeysuckle, but that's not the answer I'm looking for. Humans. Precisely, humans. Because here's why. We're trying to get technical with this stuff, okay? Let's take a look at, this is so funny. This is one of my nuggets of discovery this week. The government decided to create a definition of invasive species. And this is different than the definition that an ecologist would give, or even an environmentalist. And maybe we can even get down to break down the difference between an environmentalist and an ecologist, because I think that's extremely, extremely important. They say, an invasive species is a non-native alien to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes economic, that's the first word they use, economic damage, as well as environmental harm to human health. What is the problem with this definition? Yeah, it doesn't zoom out, right? It is anthropocentric, okay? It's from the lens of humans, okay? This is not a good definition, because if we're going to define what the actual issue of an invasive species is, we have to include all life, right? Okay, so let's take a look at Wikipedia's definition, which is a little bit better. Wikipedia, their tagline should be, we're a little bit better. An invasive species is an introduced species that harms its new environment. Okay? Invasive species adversely affects habitats and bioregions, causing ecological, environmental, and/or economic damage. So economic damage is in there. Why? Because Wikipedia is an aggregator of information, okay? And in order to get a definition into Wikipedia, you have to go through a series of checks with a bunch of different fact checkers and stuff like that, right? Some of those likely work for investment firms, financial firms, government offices, and things like that. And so guess what? Economics makes its way into fucking everything, right? So here it is in this example. But by all examples thus far, if we zoom out, is it not true that humans are the most invasive species in central Ohio and pretty much everywhere else in the world, right? Let's take a look at something else. We are behaving like an invasive species, okay? Here's the supporting facts. These hurt, and it's okay to feel hurt about this kind of stuff. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Joanna Macy and the idea of being okay and being able to express grief, okay? These are facts that when I first was introduced to them, they hurt, and they should, and it's okay to feel those things. And what's nice about this environment, and one of the benefits of music festival culture, is that we can feel those feelings without being in the gas station and the guy looking at us like, drugs, you know? Like, there's more to the story than that. 23% of land in the entire planet is still considered wilderness. Wilderness, as I understand it, I think it's per 5,000 acres has to be untouched land. 23%. And think about how much land in the world is actually uninhabitable, right? The farthest north of North America, Antarctica, and all that other stuff. 23% is left, okay? And what's worse than that, and this is a really hard one, 3% of Earth's ecosystems are still considered to be ecologically intact. So what does that mean? What that means is that the biosystems are all working at their full capacity to create energy enough for another creature to respirate and for another creature to ingest calories so that it can then feed back into the system, right? And thus create what? Create sustainability, right? So that's the idea. Can we create sustainability? And in what areas can we create that sustainability? And maybe if we have time, we can get into unpacking the energy of a unit of land and understanding all that. The next one, here's another completely insane fact. It's so insane that it sounds like it's made up. Okay, 96% of the biomass on planet Earth comprises of human bodies and our livestock. 96%, okay? 4% of the entire global biomass is animals, okay? Now we're talking about animals, we're not talking about plants, but we're talking about animals, okay? When it gets into plants, that's still some staggering information, but to me, you know, these are our species neighbors. These are our species, you know, in a lot of ways our species brothers and sisters. The closest that our DNA gets to is our primates, our mammals, our, you know, so sit with that for just a second, because I think that that's huge. I think that it's largely not talked about, in my opinion, because it's so heavy, right? It's insane. 4% walking on planet Earth. Now, there's a concept known as shifting goalposts. Has anyone heard of that before? So the idea is that when you were a child, the amount of fish in the ocean and where those fish live, because believe it or not, fish as a whole are migrating north to the poles and south to the poles to pursue oxygen, because not only the acidification of the oceans, but the heat of the oceans, the surface temperatures of the oceans are losing oxygen, because as the ocean heats up, the oxygen goes down, right? This is normative to you. 100 years ago, though, because you weren't there to witness it, when you walked into an Ohio forest, back when Wayne National Forest covered half the state, okay, when you came in here, you heard sounds. There's just, you know, the woods, right? Crickets and, you know, cicadas and stuff like that. We still hear those sounds, but because the goalposts have shifted so far, right? They're all the way over here. When you were born, you never knew that that was even a thing, okay? So this gets into a lot of different things that we don't have time to get into now, such as generation theory, the idea that we don't live long enough to see the ramifications of the changes, okay? But there's a shifting goalpost issue, okay? And it's because we are having trouble reminding the old to the young how things actually were back in the day, okay? If you talk to a salmon fisher who's old right now, they'll tell you all the places that they used to be able to fish, and slowly but surely, each one of them either gets dammed up or something else happens, right? So we don't see that. So that's shifting goalposts. Definitely something I hope you can take away with you, because those are the kinds of like concepts that if we can wrap our brains around them, we actually can do what? We can address them, right? Okay. So insect decline. Now this one, just wild. And this was actually an inspiration for some art that I created recently. I put out an album and I did a wildflower campaign because I wanted to also leave this page with hopefully some good news. And that's that, we'll start with the bad news, then we'll go to the good news, okay? The bad news is that there are many different studies here from the Xerces Society, which is, I think, maybe the most thorough, but the idea is that insect biomass particularly is changing super rapidly. So 1 to 2% of insect biomass is being lost per year. That is staggering. That is staggering. The insects are the underpinnings of all life, okay? Insects are incredibly high nutrient things for the environment, right? If you don't have dying insects on a waterway, what don't you have? You don't have fish. Then you don't have fish taking shits. You don't have shits that are feeding trees. You don't have trees growing in natural places and natural environments. Basically, it's not just, we have this story where we say it's the pollinators, right? It's just the pollinators that are the thing, right? We should, take care of our pollinators. Well, what we really need to do is take care of all insects. Insects are the underlying thing that feeds us, right? So something that's so awesome about this is that for very, very low amounts of money, achievable by any human, by any standard, and also if you're patient enough for free, you can actually fix this problem to a certain degree. You can go to places like, this is what we would consider, an insect would consider a food desert. Why? It's monocultured, right? It's monocultured grass. There is clover, but even some of the insects around here don't know what to do with the clover because it's not the kind of clover that they're used to, right? And it's also not in abundance enough to attract them, so that's also a thing, right? But you can easily do this. You can buy, I got this $20 bag, y'all, from this native wildflower supplier known as Prairie Moon. And they, for $20, you could buy this bag, right? And it had not only all the different wildflowers, they sorted them by large and small seeds. They had cover crops for $20, and it would do the entire area of this tin. So what are the benefits? Okay, it's not just that you are increasing the amount of insect biomass in your area, you're also increasing the amount of predators. Okay, and what do predators do? They take pests out. So, I get ads ever since I did this, I get ads from this fucking company that sells you, it's called Pesty. And they sell you this spray. You're supposed to go around your house and spray whatever horrible bullshit they want you to spray. When, what you can also do is just plant some fucking wildflowers, and all of a sudden you'll have, non-nest building wasps, for example, spiders, and all kinds of other predators that come in and eat those creatures and they won't be able to get a stranglehold in your area, right? This is not rocket science. This is stuff that is so simple to do. And here's another thing I did. So I'm like tilling my plot for my wildflowers, right? And then I read before I went out the next day to plant, that's not what you're supposed to do. I tried to add compost. That's not what you're supposed to do. If you want to plant wildflowers, you just pull the fucking grass out of the ground and throw the seeds in there. Wildflowers thrive on bullshit soil, okay? It's not the same as your food, right? Your food requires all kinds of energy inputs, right? But wildflowers create energy because they essentially, they formulate an ecosystem, okay? A lot of folks will try to get one kind of wildflower, but what you really want is you want grasses mixed with different types of heights. They all support each other, they all stand up, and you create literally a micro forest, right? So I just want to say that if you're seeing these facts, which are ouch, right? There's something you can do about that literally right now, okay? And I highly recommend Prairie Moon. They're Minnesota-based, I think, Wisconsin-based. They're from the general area, but anywhere in North America, they supply and create a way for you to not only get on the website, but to look at where you live, what grows there, and what combinations of seeds would be good. But it usually requires three things. You need a grass to support the flowers, you need a kind of medium tall plant, and then a tall plant. And you can do it with just three, but the little packets that they have that you can combine, they're pretty cool. Okay? So I know I spent a lot of time there, but I think it's really important to constantly look at that there are actual reactions. I think that the prevailing story is that there's nothing you can do. That is bullshit, okay? There's so much you can do. All right. Who are we? Humans. Who the heck are we? Okay, so humans had no business being so successful, okay? We don't have fangs, right? We don't secrete poisons, right? We don't have talons. There's no reason why we should have made it. So why did we become so dominant? Does anyone have any insight there? Social. We're a social creature. We are a social creature, maybe the most social creature that the earth has ever produced. Okay? Because, yeah, you could say, well, what about schools of fish, right? Well, schools of fish can't say tree, right? If I say tree, what do you see in your brain? You see a tree, right? We have extra social capabilities that they're just, we don't see the like of that anywhere else in nature, okay? Some other primates, some other large ocean-dwelling mammals, in some ways can do these kinds of things, and they show some signs of empathy, but we have the ability to create in each other images by saying words, or by looking at an image, creating words. These are things that humans can do, okay? So, we are social creatures, right? Now, why do we seek social groups? Okay, this is a really important question, because what we want to say is that we seek it because we cognate a need. That's actually not it. It's the other way around. Because we are social, we can derive some conclusions from that. And one of them is that when you're in a social group, what do you get to experience? What are the boons of being in a social group? What is it? Friendship, sure. Yeah, a sense of belonging. What else? Safety, protection, precisely. That's it, right. So, back in the day when everyone was out in the forest, you know, ooh, berries, you know what I mean? Ah, saber-tooth tiger, you know what I mean? Like, if you had somebody else with you, your chances of survival went up, right? Okay, this is such an important, maybe the central point that I'm trying to make today rests in and around this whole, like, understanding, okay? Our brains are not set up evolutionarily to be isolationists, okay? To be isolated with from one another, okay? So, very important thing to understand. Please keep that in mind. Okay, so enter Tom Murphy. He came up with a really interesting blog post that blew my mind. I know I keep saying that, but this kind of stuff, I don't know how else to put it, but I got really into music to the degree where my brain was fully consumed by it, and I didn't realize there was another type of thinking that would grasp my heart so much, that would take me this direction. But so his whole mental shred was this: let's take the events of the entire arc of human history and place them over one human lifetime. Okay, 2.5, 3 million years ago is when modern beginnings of humans started to show up on Earth, right? So we're going to take that from all the way back then and stratify it over 75 years. Okay, that's because the reason we're doing this is because that's a time scale that we can empathize with, right? Okay, we can understand that, right? So here's some staggering shit, y'all. Hold on to your butts. Let's go. So the first 70 years, remember, what we're taking is the whole arc of human history. The first 70 years, we lived sustainably with planet Earth. What did that look like? That looked like us going around in the forest, picking a berry, taking a shit, taking the energy, and returning it back to the land that we were living on, right? That's what it was, okay? In this workshop, I want to make something very clear very early. I am not suggesting that we need to go back to being hunter-gatherers. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But there's a lot of cues to take from that. In the last 5 years, Homo sapiens, us, right, the humans that you would recognize, appeared on Earth, okay? In the last 5 years, remember what we're doing is we're taking 3 million years and we're condensing it down to 75 years, okay? So, in the last 15 weeks, we developed agriculture, okay? So what does that mean? That means 74 and however many weeks, 45 weeks or 40 weeks of our entire genetic history did not use agriculture as an energy input, okay? So whenever there's the guy on the podcast, it's like, yeah, bro, like all you gotta do is eat salad and chicken, man. Okay, he's onto something because why? because we weren't designed to eat processed foods to the degree that we are, right? But I also think that there's a whole nother like can of worms with all that, which I think is pretty obvious. The last 4 days is the age of science. The last 4 days. We're not even talking weeks, we're not even talking years, we're talking 4 days. So what is the age of science? The age of science is when we decided, wait a minute, there's objective truth, and we can find it. We can research things, we can learn, we can pull things from our experience, and we can test them against other things in our experience. We can take these things and we can come up with conclusions. And these conclusions are repeatable, right? Okay, in the last 36 hours, y'all, we discover what? We discover coal, right? We start burning it, right? What does coal allow us to do? Anybody? Yeah, it allows us to get a lot more done with a lot less effort. Okay, this is going to be an emerging theme. The last 12 hours is the age of rapid ecological devastation. Okay, that's 50 years of our time, the actual time. Okay, so are we ecologically, genetically set up to understand what the fuck is happening to us? No, not even in the slightest. Okay, because the speed upon which the earth moves, the speed upon which genetic development moves, is so much slower than whatever the fuck we're doing when we're a bunch of primates finding some shit to burn, okay? So, I was like, wait a minute. This presents an awesome opportunity. I'm gonna take these numbers and extrapolate them to more recent events. You ready for this one? It gets even crazier. Okay. If 50 years is 12 hours, then we've only had computers for the last 8 hours. We've only had smartphones for the last 4 hours. We've only had social media for the last 5 hours. Okay? We've only had ChatGPT in the last 30 minutes. Okay? These are very, very important things to understand. We are not genetically set up to understand what the fuck is happening to us. That is such a important thing to hold on to in the center of, if you can keep that in the center of your thoughts as you scroll through your phone, which apparently now the global average of screen time is 6 hours per day. Okay. I know it's heavy, y'all. I appreciate you sticking around. I appreciate you being willing to accept this information. Thank you. So E.O. Wilson, okay? Great systems thinker, great systems ecologist. He said, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, which is true. We've